This could have taken place during rush hour. Fortunately, there was very few people on the bridge. The ship's crew and the pilot on board did what they could to try to prevent this from happening. Unfortunately, the loss of power at a very key moment meant that they didn't have any control over the vessel as it was departing from the port of Baltimore. And what we see this morning, again, is the remnants of that incident. They're still looking for the bodies of those who have been lost, and the salvage operation will be starting shortly.
Yeah. How unusual is an incident like this?
Well, I mean, we've just had a rash of ships hitting bridges around the world. This is about the third this year. The issue really comes down to the fact that we move a lot of cargo around the world. The volume and the velocity that we move cargo has increased over the years, and so we see a lot of ships moving very quickly, not a lot of time in port, and at times, sometimes the maintenance and upkeep of vessels could be put aside.
Yeah. Do you think because of that sort of pressure on the system, sometimes the sort of safety checks and potentially even, for example, say the tugboats that were working with this particular vessel, maybe they might have spent more time with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that cost trade-off benefit. We see that all the time. The tugs in the harbor have other jobs. They move other vessels. They were getting ready to bring other vessels into the port of Baltimore. So they're always trading off. The thing is, we move so much cargo that there's very thin margins of safety at times. And it's very easy to think about it. We take for granted driving down a road and just a little bit of paint keeps somebody on their side of the road and us on our side. And if something goes wrong very quickly, there's not a lot of time to react. It's more so in ocean shipping when dealing with ships over 400 meters long and 100,000 tons.
Yeah, and when you look at the size of it as it's still sitting there around that bridge debris, what are authorities going to be looking for as they try and assess exactly what happened?
So they're actually going to be going back and investigating the ship and the crew to ensure that there was nothing wrong there. We know the crew has been inspected for drugs and alcohol. That's been tested by the NTSB. They will start looking at what exactly caused that engine to fail on them. Was it mechanical? Was it electrical? Was it fuel? So they'll go ahead and do that inspection of the crew. They will go through the records of the vessel. There was a port state control inspection of the vessel. U.S. Coast Guard went on the vessel in September up in New York. They'll take a look at that. And then, of course, the big issue they're going to have to do is start removing the vessel from the incident and then work on clearing the debris between the pylons to open up the port of Baltimore. Right now, there's about 30 to 40 ships stuck in the port of Baltimore, and a large portion of the port is inaccessible. And Baltimore being a major port, is a port that does about $70 billion worth of cargo every year. About 43 million tons moved through the port last year.
Yeah, so that could be very, very damaging to the state, to the city. And in an election year, I see President Biden has said that the government will pay for this, but I guess it's not going to happen quickly.
It's not going to be a very quick operation at all. This is going to require a massive amount of resources that need to be put together. Port of Baltimore doesn't have it there, so you were talking about relocating gear from all around the world. This is also going to be multi-jurisdictional. You're dealing with the water. That's going to be the U.S. Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers. We're dealing with the Port of Maryland. And then the legal implications here with this ship, which is a Singapore flag vessel that operated for for a Denmark company, Maersk. There are a lot of issues here internationally. An Indian crew. It's just, again, an example of what international shipping means when an accident happens.
Yeah. You know, the vision, of course, I mean, we were looking just as we were talking at live pictures as sort of morning is breaking again in Baltimore. The collapse of that bridge was catastrophic. It was like a domino effect watching it. What in its construction, you know, in terms of the conversations you've heard today, allowed this to happen?
Well, that was a bridge built 47 years ago, and 47 years ago, ships like the Dolly didn't exist. So, I mean, you were planning for vessels much smaller to go under a bridge like that. And even today, Dolly is not a large ship. It's about 10 years old right now, but it's nowhere near the largest ship. And the material used to protect the pylons of the vessel were not enough to stop this vessel from coming in. The ship was so large that it would have basically driven over the top of the dolphins to keep them away. And the ship physically struck the bridge. And so there really wasn't enough protection for that. And that's something that needs to be done globally. We need to be reassessing our infrastructure, making sure that where these large vessels are sailing past very, fixed structures that we take for granted every day. We don't think about driving over a bridge, are they protected in case of an accident? And unfortunately, this accident happened right at the wrong time. A minute earlier, a minute later, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this.
Yeah, it's so true. But as we talked about right at the start, if many more cars had been travelling, it would have been just a horror show, but just quite extraordinary. We really appreciate you joining us, Sal. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.